When in the middle of the 17th century the importation of the porcelain from China dropped away, the Delft potters stepped into that niche and started to make objects inspired by those objects and sometimes even straight copies from those objects. Several years later, when the importation regained traction and the objects came to Europe again through the East India traders, the Delft potters had to rethink their game and had to redo what they were making. One of the things they were starting to make was flower vases. From the 19th century we call these vases tulip vases, but originally they were called flower vases. And these finger vases or fan-shaped flower vases would sit on a mantle with a couple of flowers in each of the spouts. These are the common flower vases. The rarer ones are the pyramidal flower vases that go from anything 25 centimeters a foot high to about 1.80 meters, about 6 foot high. Those are the extremely rare ones, but we see them from time to time. You can imagine my amazement when I came about this figure of a lady holding a basket. And it is also a flower basket. It has holes on top for flowers to be put in there. When I bought this figure in February 2014, I immediately said it was made at the Greek A factory, a factory in Delft. I said that based on the decoration on the base, the decoration of the way she is made up, and also that only the Greek A factory could have at that time probably made such a beautiful figure. At the end of the 17th century, it was really Queen Mary who pushed the production of flower vases in the city of Delft. She loved gardening, she loved everything Oriental, and when I bought this figure, I even said, this is probably Queen Mary herself. There's a couple of things that I base that on. This lady is wearing her hair à la Fontaine, something that was really done in the English and French courts only. This lady is wearing a pearl necklace of 37 pearls with a clasp, a diamond clasp. Usually in the end of the 17th century, they would have had a ribbon to tie the necklace in the back of the neck. She's wearing a Japanese coat. The Japanese coat was something that also was made of Indian silk, something that was only worn on the English court. And the way she stands very proudly, I said, this is Queen Mary, made at the Greek A factory. Well, there were some people that didn't agree with me and that said, listen, Robert, you can't prove anything. And I said, you're absolutely right. When in May 2014 I received an auction listing from an auction, a small auction in France, and it said Bouquetière, Delft, circa 1690, I immediately asked for some photos to be sent over. The auction house sent me some photos of the Bouquetière in situ. They weren't very good, but I could clearly see the same base, the same coat with decoration, the same basket, but not a female, but a male figure. Did I really stumble upon the partner to Queen Mary, which would have been King William? I didn't want to draw a lot of attention to the figure and to the find, so I asked my assistant to go over there, dress easily and casually, stroll into the auction house, and whatever it takes, just bring home this figure. About a month later, the figure came to me. I had to wait for export licenses and payments and shipments. When I put them next to each other, it was clearly a pair. Of course, I was super excited that it wasn't only a pair, that he was clearly identifiable as King William by the way his hair is, and mainly because of his Venetian cravat. The Venetian cravats were something that King William wore all the time. He's always on portraits with that, and it is something that is very typically him and that not a lot of people were wearing and were allowed to wear in the end of the 17th century. He also is dressed in a home gown, in a Japanese coat, with a similar bit of decoration as the figure of Queen Mary. Not only is it a great find to have King William, of course, this figure was actually marked. It's marked AK for Adriaan Cox, and Adriaan Cox was the owner of the Greek A factory from 1686 to 1701. I employed 3 art historians to do some work for me. One of them had to do the history of the figures themselves, of course. The second one, the provenance, where did these figures come from? Were they a pair until a certain moment? And the third one did some studies on the coats that they were wearing and the clothes at that time. I brought the figure to my restorer, and within a couple of days I got the phone call from the restorer that I actually had been waiting for. And she told me that this figure was restored in exactly the same manner as she was around the 1950s, with the same materials from England originally, in the exact way. So another clue to the fact that they were with each other until a certain moment. Then a couple of weeks later, the art historian that was doing the research on the provenance and on the history of where these pieces came from called me up and said, "Listen, Robert, it's very interesting. I found the history of the male figure in the Dardin family in France, and the Dardin family had both of them until 1978. Well, the Dardin family did a lot of business with the Netherlands in the 1870s and the 1880s, and probably that's the time that they were bought as a pair. By the time they trickled down the family through 1978, people didn't really know what they had anymore, and when the last person in the family passed away, the figures were split up. The male figure stayed in the Dardin family, and the female figure was sold immediately and went to a private collection in Antwerp, from where I bought it. I'm very proud to present this pair of unique bouquetière figures of King William and Queen Mary, made in the Greek A factory by Adriaan Cox around 1690. The research done to these figures, to the provenance of the figures, to the clothes that they're wearing, and to all the elements that make them specifically King William and Queen Mary, are described in this catalogue that I made in 2015. Everything can be read in there.